Hi, everyone. How's everyone? Thank you so much for dialing in or live streaming in, and greetings from New York City. It's about 7:30 in the morning. I'm actually a little bit barely awake, to be honest, and so I apologize if I sound a little bit mustier than usual. Jason, Grant, and Diana, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity here to speak to this very illustrious group of designers on design thinking. I do think that it's a bit of an audacious task, if you will, but Jason, as you very well said, I think when you put someone on a dare, then they better rise up to the occasion. So I hope I could rise up to the occasion. The topic for today is how I'm teaching myself design thinking. And frankly, I think it is a good time for me to be talking about this right now because I'm about 7 months into this journey where I started teaching myself design thinking. And I've been immersing myself in every aspect of it as much as I can by applying it actually to various aspects of my life. Before I kind of launch into it, let me give you a brief background on myself. My name is Nirupa Umapathy. I am originally from India. I left India when I was 18 to come to America to study anthropology and economics. So I do have an undergraduate degree in anthropology. At that time, I had visions to save the world and do some good work, and somehow I think I chickened out and joined Wall Street and financial services instead. So I spent my last 14 years in financial services. A majority of it was working at two major Wall Street banks. And the last year, I was at a client at a hedge fund. And my stint there ended rather prematurely, and much to my surprise, I think, I decided to take the opportunity to really step back and assess my life and figure out what I want to do next. And this is how design thinking came into play in my life. So I want to give you a little bit of a background on what I mean by design thinking. So specifically, I'm talking about life design. So life design. So the process or the awesome problem-solving adventure of solving all the integral parts of your own life. So life design in the sense of designing the ideal career or the ideal vocation, designing the ideal life that is going to support your ambitions, your drive, your sense of purpose. So this is kind of along the lines of where I started my gateway or my entry point into design thinking. A little story first, actually, on how all of this started, because I do like stories. And so in November of last year, when I found out recently that I was going to be parting ways with my employer, I was having dinner with a friend in San Francisco, and I was sort of dejected, frankly, because I really was in a bit of a situation where I wasn't sure that I had any solutions where I was going next. And Marnie holds my hand and she says, "Girlfriend, I have this book for you and it's absolutely going to change your life. You absolutely have to read it." And here I am, like kind of rolling my eyes a little bit, the cynical Wall Street person that I was inside at that time. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, just another self-help book, I'm sure, And but sure enough, honestly, this book did actually not only change my life at that point of time, it actually is changing my life as we speak. So a little bit about the book itself. It is the incredible book written by the two Stanford professors, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. It's called Designing Your Life. How to live a joyful and well-lived life. So I pretty much started reading this book on the plane, on the flight back to New Jersey, which is where I live. And every aspect of that book really spoke to me. I felt like I really needed to take a step back and do a deep dive into the nitty-gritties of my own life and figure out what is it that really I wanted to do with myself. And that's how my journey into design thinking began, with this book. It was a practice of immersion almost, because the book is structured really historically, or traditionally it's been structured to help students at Stanford figure out what they should do when they grow up. So I kind of reframed it to myself and I said, why can't I use this book? But now that I'm at a point of transition and figure out what I want to do next, what do I want to be when I grow up, even though I'm 37 years old at that time. And so that's how it happened. The exercises in the book were very clearly outlined, and they were very much designed to follow the Stanford design process, which is the 5-step process that you all are very familiar with. But just for a point of reference for this call, I will be using the 5 stages, and I'll try to walk you through how I was using those as with my life as a case study, which is the first stage is empathize, the second stage is define the problem, third is ideate, fourth is prototype, and fifth is test. But in this book, since we were talking about vocation design, they have this last step as being choose. So choosing from all the different options that you come up with from prototyping. So I'm about 7 months into this. Starting to read the book and starting to do the exercises, it became pretty evident to me that I needed to take more time off. So originally the plan had been to come back and interview for a job in financial services at the end of March. But the more and more I dug into the exercises in the book, the more and more I was going through the empathize stage myself and really going into and looking in my life from a 360, I kind of realized that there were multiple things that I wanted to do with my life. There were multiple aspects of my personality and my desire to do and make impact that were kind of surfacing. And so my original problem had been, what is the next career? I had to very quickly, within 3 to 4 months, kind of reframe that to, perhaps this is not about what is it going to be my next career. It perhaps is, what is a best portfolio of possibilities whereby I can be really firing off on all cylinders and maximizing not only my experiential knowledge from capital markets, but also maximizing my values and priorities and really honing in on my aptitudes and skill sets. So very much from the beginning, the empathize stage of design of this journey, I mean, I spent about 2 months actually really assessing my life view. Who am I? Where do I want to go? What do I believe in? What are my values? What are my priorities? And then I started assessing. I did a lot of exercises on work view. What is the role of work in my life? What does money mean to me at this point in my life? What is good work? What makes good work good? And last, worldview. Right? What was my relationship in this world to, what is my relationship to the world? Did I want to be a participant? Did I want to be a contributor? Did I want to be more impactful? Did I want to be driven by purpose in a certain direction? So kind of putting all of this together as part of the empathize stage of the design process, I came up with this really awesome kind of complex map almost. And then there were lots of seed words and key themes that came up. And it became very evident to me from the get-go that the direction that I was going to take myself forward was going to be oriented towards certain parameters. The parameters being, the values were, I wanted to lead a life of purpose. I wanted to do work that was impactful. And because I was in the process of retooling myself or reinventing myself, it became very, very important to me that I was going to exercise autonomy. I have autonomy of time and I have autonomy of space, which means that I'm not going to be sitting in a cubicle this year. As it concerned work, I think it became also very evident to me that at this point in my career, I wanted this kind of work to integrate with all aspects of my life. I did not want to be the split personality that I was, which was work on Wall Street, be a certain kind of person, and then come home and be a different kind of person. I was looking for coherency across all aspects of my life. So this then led me to the decision that I was going to take the entire year off. And I took the entire year off. And similar to Ranjani, I am designing a year of sabbatical at this point, or at least I am using design thinking also to design my sabbatical. A couple of caveats at the outset. I mean, taking an entire year off and not being able to earn money is probably not for everyone. And I completely acknowledge that. I feel very fortunate and grateful that I have the opportunity and the freedom to be able to do so. But I also do think that like any other problem in life, I think there can always be a multi-stage process to, if you have a desired outcome, you can always plan and kind of get to where you want to get to. So from the standpoint of resources, I also will clarify that as soon as I decided that I was going to take the year off, I went back to the drawing board and I completely disrupted my life. I decided to support a year of sabbatical, what do I need to do? So that became my design problem number 2. So first it was about where am I going next? Then it became actually, how am I going to design an awesome sabbatical for myself so I can figure out where I want to go next? And third, it became, how am I going to redesign my entire life to support this year of sabbatical? This kind of dramatic shift in thinking, if you will, this kind of iterative problem solving and dynamic problem solving would frankly not have happened if I didn't really take the book to heart and the principles of the book to heart, frankly. So that's that. And then like I want to talk a little bit about the second stages, obviously, and also the structure that made this entire exercise, frankly, successful, which is that early on, I became part of a design community. So I know the role of community and the idea of working in diverse groups is very important for designers and for design problems and for the efficacy of design problems. So my friend also not only had the foresight to recommend the book to me, but she also had the foresight to start a book club. So all we did in this book club was we would get together once a month and discuss the book. Not only did we discuss the book in theory, we discussed the book in how we were practicing and learning by doing, by following through the exercises in the book and applying it in real time to our lives. So each one of us, frankly, was kind of starting a little prototype of our entire lives at that point in time. Now, I think that I was very fortunate that I had the support of community very early, because design thinking is not a concept that is known amongst a lot of my friends and definitely in my family. And to be starting on a journey this radical and transformative for me, I needed to have the support of a like-minded group. And this is what this awesome community that was actually mostly women sitting on the West Coast. I was the only virtual participant, but this was what the awesome community was doing for each other. We created a very open and honest environment where we would dial in every month and we would talk about our life journeys. We would talk about how design thinking was fitting in this journey. We would go through the brainstorming of the ideas that came up subsequently. Then the next step, actually, within the design process was that we obviously were going into ideation. So the problem was already defined. We all were defining the problem as how are we going to design our own version of our awesome and extraordinary life. And how are we going to design it in such a way that it kind of meets the parameters and values that are suitable to the idiosyncrasies of our own life. So the next step then now is obviously ideation, right? And this is the part that I thoroughly enjoyed. I've got to be honest with you. I've always been kind of like a prolific idea generator, but the few techniques that we were exposed to within the book, one of them particularly mind mapping, totally took off for me. It exploded like a supernova. I've never mind mapped before until I started using this book. So the first thing that I did within 2 months of reading the book was to go back and do a bunch of mind maps. I mind mapped on all kinds of things. My apartment is littered with mind maps. I mind mapped on what is important to me in my life. I mind mapped on what freedom means. I mind mapped on what money means. I mind mapped on all the different hobbies and things and activities that have always been part of the menu of my life. And this kind of set the stage, actually, a very fertile ground for me to really go back and step back and look at a universe of possibilities, but more importantly, because within the constraints of mind mapping, I was coming up with things within 2 to 3 minutes. A lot of the ideas and key themes that presented themselves were also very revelatory because they were coming from a different part of my brain. It was almost as if I was opening myself up to a very different side of me, which it was fascinating and exciting. The mind mapping essentially was to lay the foundation for prototyping, which is the next step, right? And when I talk about prototyping, I'm strictly referring to the stage or the outline that the way prototyping was defined within the Stanford book. And they basically use a parallel prototyping process, which is essentially, in this case, for life design, they ask you to come up with a 3-pronged prototype. So the first sleeve of the prototype is Plan A or Plan 1, which is that thing you do, or that thing I did, which was essentially financial services. And it was a very specific job function within financial services. So you have to come up with as big a list of possibilities under Plan 1. That was easy. So I obviously came up with all the possible jobs and careers, or jobs that I could explore within financial services. Then Plan 2 is that thing that you would do if Plan 1 is not an option. So this is the alternative. This is the Plan B, right? And they don't like to call it a Plan B, but my point is, for the life of me, when I first went in and tried to prototype this or try to mind map around this, I couldn't come up with any ideas on what my alternative career would be. And I was a bit shocked by that, frankly, because I'm a person of many diverse interests. And I was like, come on, Nirupa, I think you can come up with something. So I came up with this one idea, which was essentially that I can use my financial markets, capital markets knowledge, and the incredible network that I have here, I'm going to use it as a bridge. To what? No idea. I just laid it out on the map and just left it at that, or on the prototype. The third aspect of the prototype is, if time and money were not a consideration, what would this be? What would this vocation be for you? And so essentially this was the bucket list of vocations, right? And guess what? It completely lit up for me. I had all kinds of ideas that came up as part of Plan C or Plan 3, including writing, including producing content on media, for which I have had no experience. Travel kept coming up again and again. And then the other option was entrepreneurship. Now, I kind of sat with these different options, and then I took a step back, and then I decided that because I'm on a year of sabbatical, very intentionally trying to pivot away from financial services as I know it, I decided to freeze all the options on Plan 1. I decided not to go through the prototyping stage on Plan 1 at all. I held it constant. I decided that I was going to revisit those options next year. But what I promised myself was, because it is important to stay in the network, that I would keep in touch with all the people that would possibly be, that are friends, that are employers, that are people with whom I could possibly work next year. I kind of kept in touch with them. I updated them on my journey and where I am, and that, at some point I would like to reconnect in the future. Plan 2 was still sort of a zero, so I kind of just left it, and so I decided to start prototyping Plan 3. So within Plan 3 now, I am sort of in mid stages of what I started out with, or the concepting. So currently I'm working on a writing project, for instance, where I'm documenting stories of people who have had the courage to get out there and design their own version of success and lead awesome and extraordinary lives. So this writing project, by the way, again, going back to how design thinking is kind of transforming my life, I decided that I'm going to use the structure of design thinking to write this book or write this writing project. What I mean by that is essentially, it's going to use techniques like co-created narratives. The way I interview these people, I'm going to use ethnography. So I'm doing interviews, but I'm also equally trying to very intentionally use a design approach, i.e., what I'm saying is I don't have a conclusion on the book. What I'm trying to do is find my way through the stories into what the end conclusion of this book is going to be. So it's super experimental, but also super exciting. And as part of this writing project, I then decided that I would love to travel to collect material. So travel now has become sort of formalized field study for me, or field work. I'm spending about 6 months this year traveling. I'm frankly traveling like a student, doing things like couch surfing and work away, and really traveling as cheaply on a bare bones budget as I can. And that also was exciting because originally I would have probably gone into this very preconceived notion of travel. But now that I have this kind of designer mindset embedded in me, everything is a possibility. So I kind of framed the question on travel as, how might I design a travel itinerary when I'm not working this year? How might I travel across, 10 to 14 countries this year, making use of shared resources, making use of the shared economy, which is essentially what I'm doing, frankly. And so that was my first part of the prototype, and I'm sort of like in mid stages of it. It's still evolving. I'm constantly iterating on it. And the best part about it is I've freed myself from this outcome of perfection and of failure. So I'm enjoying this entire process as I go along. The second aspect of my prototype right now is that part of when I did my original soul searching as part of the mind mapping, it was also clear to me that I wanted to be involved in something disruptive. What I mean by that is I wanted to get to learn and immerse myself in technology that was going to change our lives. So now I'm not a technologist, but I've always been very curious about technology, and I've never had the opportunity to really work with technology. So I kept kind of circling around virtual reality and artificial intelligence. And I did a few networking interviews with people in the space early on in artificial intelligence. I did a few networking conversations on virtual reality. But this is the beauty and the power of the network and using your resources intelligently, right? One of my very dear friends, who has actually been in media for many, many years of her life, is now starting a virtual reality and augmented reality content and solutions company. And she is now an entrepreneur. She's a serial entrepreneur, but she's getting ready to start her business. So she and started ideating, and then we've come up with a few ideas on how we are going to produce content, which is once again going to tap into the techniques of storytelling. And we've kind of concepting at this point this idea of doing pop-up talk shows in the streets of New York and have people talk about their lives and have people talk about what goes into the different aspects of their life, including work, what is meaningful work for them. We are in the very early stages of this, but again, this prototyping process kind of completely exploded for me in terms of going to a spectrum that I frankly would not have even like explored up until now. Now I've traveled for about 4 or 5 months. I've been in different environments. I've been in different contexts. I've been mind mapping. I've been in touch with my design community. Now here I am suddenly, you know, where I started in November, I'm not the same person that I was in November now. I've been exposed to new information, new data points, and guess what? Again, my mind's kind of interacting and reacting to all this information. And I also had an amazing opportunity to really, really look at my own life as self-ethnography. You know, so every time I was in a new country or every time I was in a new environment, I would observe myself, collect a data point on how I handled myself, what was resonating with me, what was not resonating with me, what was energizing me, what was not energizing me. So, you know, I had a pretty good idea of the fact that at the end of the day, if you really take a step back and observe yourself and observe how you react to the various aspects and relationships in your life, there are some really valuable clues in there on what really puts you in your mode of flow, what really optimizes your attention, your energy, and where you want to deploy effort. So I now have this really rich journal almost of all kinds of things that I observed. And one of the most revelatory things that came about as part of the 6 months of kind of observation or self-field study, if you will, and travel was that I actually don't like selling. Now, can you imagine this? Because I've been in sales for as long as I know, you know, so I've been in sales selling complicated financial services products for 14 years. And so here I was actually pushing myself in a direction and an angle where, frankly, I had other interests in and I was leaning towards doing something very different. I wanted to be more strategic. I wanted to be devising solutions, and I wanted to be working in environments with people where it encouraged a certain kind of problem solving. You know, I realized that I want to be in an environment where I'm not only working with smart people, but I'm working with people that are both creative and analytical. Now, my last 14 years in financial services was very much in kind of like this very type A mode of just kind of extracting results in a certain fashion. As much as I learned a lot from it, I realized that at the end of the day, that was not me. What I wanted to be was in a very, very open, collaborative, and transparent environment where essentially the idea of problem solving is turned on its head many different ways. And more importantly, I wanted to be in an environment that allowed you to fail again and again and again, as opposed to being in an environment where failure is penalized. So if you work in finance, and if you're familiar with finance, there's a very popular quote on there that says, you are only as good as your last trade. So what that means is that you constantly have to be marking yourself to market. You need to constantly be assessing your value on the fly. So in a way, you're constantly doing the sense of, am I winning all the time? And, you know, I was getting tired of it. Even though I'm a very competitive person, I was a very competitive person. So for me, this whole radical shift in the way design thinking encouraged designers to think, which is failure is not only acceptable, failure is the way to build your solution forward, fail fast. All of these things, I think, was just really, really eye-opening for me, and I really embraced it. Now I think in my new life, in my new lens, I don't look at it as even success or failure. I look at whether a product works or a service works or doesn't work. I look at whether the solution is fitting what I'm looking for or what the customer is looking for, the client is looking for. So very intrinsically and organically, I'm starting to move towards this very human-centered design mindset, which I'm so excited by. I'm in the very early stages of this. And what I would say is, it really was also a bit of a natural transformation for me because, as I mentioned early on, I had an undergraduate degree in anthropology, and anthropology, you know, is all about context and valuing the importance of context. So the whole empathized aspect of the design process kind of came naturally to me. I'm also an empath to begin with. And so in a way, the whole thing was sort of in the flow of who I was as a person, and how I also had been trained in college, if you will. Now, moving beyond prototyping, I just want to make one comment as to how options always change when you're presented with new ideas and you're presented with a new network, if you will. So my network is much more expanded now from all my travels and from me just like interacting with people in the design world and just kind of getting myself out there outside of the financial services world. I went back to my mind map. I went back to my prototyping of my plan B, which was, remember, the alternative to the thing that you would do if you didn't have an alternative. And guess what? Totally lit up. I had a bunch of ideas, and so now I'm in the process of early stages of prototyping of some of those ideas. I concluded that from all the exercises and all the practice that I was doing and getting out there and just even like doing the writing project, I realized a few things. One, I love facilitation and I would love to do workshops. Second, the topic of empowerment and human potential kept coming up again and again. So I'm currently in the process of prototyping a couple of early stage life design / financial design salons / workshops in New York with just my friends and people that work across different backgrounds, if you will, in New York. I'm also in the process of working with a good friend of mine who is a divorce attorney on designing something that is a much more specialized integrated product for design for divorce. Again, a topic that is kind of close to my heart, but at the same time, I've never really thought about divorce law or what a client goes through in divorce, but I'm going to essentially teach myself service design, frankly, by just mapping the way we want to design this product. Frankly, it'll also be product design where I'll be teaching myself product design through this process of immersing myself in this problem that we have defined. And then I continue with my writing project. I think we will probably start testing out these pop-up talk shows in New York City. And who knows? I don't know where it goes from here. I am so excited. I could never be happier. I wake up every morning just feeling completely re-energized and really wanting to take on every aspect of this world. And not only that, I want to be part of this very dynamic exchange of, being one of those people that puts out good energy and really also tries to make a difference in other people's lives by at least engaging one person in a meaningful conversation about their life, what makes them happy. And this, frankly, is the reason why I would say design thinking has changed my life. Design thinking has actually disrupted my life. And in kind of closing, what I would like to reiterate is the 5 mindsets that was laid out, at least in the Stanford book, which is curiosity. I wake up every morning no longer with this attitude of I should do this. And it's more about how can I do this? How might I do this? I'm starting to use the language of designers. It's becoming like muscle memory at this point. It's almost always like, I wonder if I can do this, as opposed to like, I think the solution is this. The I think part of it, I'm kind of really trying to step back on and not be in this hyper analytical mode, which I tend to get into often. The bias to action part of it, I always have been a person that has had a very strong bias to action. I consider myself a doer, but now, I have this inherent discipline that design thinking is instilled, which is that it is good to be excited about a lot of things, but also, don't be prematurely wedded or committed to a solution at the get-go. The first solution that you see does not have to be the best solution. And then the third thing is I reframe everything constantly right now. I try to reframe all kinds of things, all kinds of silly things in my life. I constantly am approaching problem solving from this very important mindset or technique of reframing, if you will. And radical collaboration, by the way, I have always been a team player and I've enjoyed working in a collaborative fashion. But now I've completely redefined the idea of my network. My network is no longer just people that are in New York and brick and mortar and people that I know. The network is people that are listening to me right now or will replay into this Facebook group. My network now is Diane M.A. Fernandez and Jason Grant and all the wonderful people that they know. So the idea of the network, which was somewhat limited by physical constraints in the past for me, I've completely opened it up. I'm worldwide open, and every connection is an opportunity to develop and build a meaningful relationship, whether it's a personal or a professional relationship, if you will. So with all of that, I think that I'm super excited. My next stage is really that I'm starting to take a few courses now in design thinking and really now go outward and expanding my knowledge a little bit, my fundamentals a little bit. So I took 2 free courses. One was Acumen and Ariel Group presented this incredible course on storytelling for change, which I completed earlier this year. And I also finished the first course offered by Acumen and IDEO on human-centered design. And I was part of a virtual group, and we solved a real-life problem, which was essentially coming up with better ways of empowering people on what good nutrition means. So I started out in design thinking as an individual and applying it to my life. And now I'm in the process of applying design thinking to the outside world and figure out where I could get involved and engaged in to solve real world problems. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So this is it. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, Jason and Diana. More than happy to take any questions if I can figure it out. It looks like there are no questions right now. So in closing, I would like to just say that I think you all know where to reach me. I'm available. I will be honest with you. I use my social media during specific chunks of time only because I write and it takes a lot of dedicated time when I'm not turned on all the time. But certainly, as you know, I really would welcome the opportunity to connect with you and get to know your story. And similarly, if you want to talk a little bit more about life design and how I've kind of reinterpreted life design from the Stanford model, I'll be more than happy and thrilled to talk with you. And of course, the future is ripe for radical collaboration. So Jason and Diana, keep doing the great work that you're doing. Thank you. Actually, Jason, I see that you have a question here, which I see. How do you step out of the head-based thinking and more into the full body thinking? So I'm going to answer that question. So frankly, I actually always have sort of been kind of a lateral thinker. So in the sense that, I've always had this kind of creative free association process in my head, but I never had a very formal technique of, opening opening that side of my brain, if you will. But what I've started doing now to get into this head-based thinking or get out of the head-based thinking, when I feel like I'm approaching a problem from a very analytical, I think standpoint, I immediately get down on the floor and start doing a mind map. I kind of put myself under a constraint of 2 to 3 minutes, and I put a seed word in there, and I'm like da 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 da, and then just like explode out on a mind map. In fact, it's been so effective that I'm starting to actually teach myself to do that in my head now, which I think has been phenomenal. I ran my first mind mapping circle yesterday with actually 3 of my close friends, and we talked about the idea of unlocking memory and dreams through mind mapping. So I essentially went through a whole series of exercises with them where they mind mapped, and there's a virtual team. They're all based in India and Bangladesh. And it was incredible as to how some of my friends started out with this. I think from a conceptual standpoint too, it became very quickly an I feel experiential kind of mindset. So hopefully that answered your question, Jason. The second important thing that I do want to mention to you, I realize, frankly, I have this very love-hate relationship with knowledge and learning. I love learning, but as it concerns knowledge, I want to say this, though I also realized that the more knowledge that I had, or the more empowered I was with very traditional textbook kind of knowledge, I found that it kind of was getting in the way. It was kind of becoming like a censor or self-editor almost of ideas. So that is really the reason why, very intentionally, when I started this whole design thinking journey, I decided that I'm only going to read one book and follow that book. I didn't jump into all the books from IDEO. I didn't really change by design and all of that. Instead, it was a very deliberate, I'm going to keep my knowledge foundation here, get the key principles, and then from there, just kind of really allow myself the freedom and the flexibility to reinterpret what is presented in that book and test out the validity of it by live practice. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about showing up and practicing, applying it as much as you can, and learning from those kind of empirical data points. And that's pretty much it, I think. And Ranjini Rao, do you have a life vision using design thinking? Yes, I do have a life vision using design thinking. If you asked me for my one-person vision statement right now, is actually, I'm going to have to just kind of do this on the fly, so it's not going to be very smooth. I foresee, and I'm building my way into a a life which not only is going to unlock my own human potential, but a life where I'm going to try to facilitate how to unlock human potential in other beings, such that we all should get out there and just be happy and joyful and in a state of flow. I think that's my life vision. Thank you. Thanks for asking that question. It's a great question. That's pretty much it, team and everyone. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing weekend. You know where to find me. And Jason and Diana, once again, thank you so much for the opportunity, guys. Appreciate it. Bye.